That is what is called Atta Sanya. Kittavatajananda Attanang Panyapento Panyapeti Ruping Vahi Ananda Parittang Attanang Panyapento Panyapeti Rupi Me Paritto Attati Ruping Vahi Ananda Anantang Attanang Panyapento Panyapeti Rupi Me Ananda Attati Aruping Vahi Ananda Parittang Attanang Panyapento Panyapeti Arupi Me Paritto Attati Aruping Vahi Ananda Anantang Attanang Panyapento Panyapeti Arupi Me Atta Attoti Ananda Attoti. Okay. Rupi Me Atta Rupi Me Atta Paritta Rupi Me Atta Ananto Rupi Me Arupi Me Paritto Atta Arupi Me Ananto Atta. The Paritta, Ananta are the difference in here. Now, let us see the translation. In what way Sananda does one describing self describes it? Describe himself as having material form and as limited, one describes. So material form, on the one hand, somebody would say material form is limited. Or one describing self as having material form and is infinite. One description is material form is limited, another would say material form is unlimited, infinite. One describing thus, myself has material form and infinite. Or describing self as having material form as infinite. So one would say, myself has material form and that self is limited. Because of the material form is limited. And somebody else would say, myself has material form and is infinite. Why? Because the material form is infinite, therefore self also is infinite. Another would say, describing self as immaterial and immaterial and limited. So one describes myself is immaterial and limited. So his material form, when it is infinite, he said myself also is limited. That means he identifies the form, the self with the quality of the form. Or material or immaterial. If it is immaterial, limited, he says his self is immaterial, limited. If it is material and immaterial and unlimited, then he would say myself also is immaterial and unlimited. Myself is immaterial and limited. Or describe himself as immaterial and finite. One would say myself is immaterial and finite. So he associates with the quality of the form. Therefore, Ananda, one who describes self as having material form and as limited, either describes such a self as existing only in the present or he describes such a self as existing there in the future, or he thinks that which is not, thus I will convert towards the state of being thus. That means I will convert, thus somebody else believes something different from mine, I would convert into my belief, because I very strongly hold on to it. This is another kind of upadana. This being so, it can aptly be said that the settled view of self as having material form and as limited underlies this. So there is no any certainty. One believes one thing, another believes another thing. One who believes certain things want to convert the other into that belief. If the other person is very convinced that what he believes is right, so he tries to convince this person to convert to his belief. In other words, this is just a belief. One holds on to it very strongly without knowing certainty of this existence of self. If the one who is converted to other, he didn't have his own view. One who thinks of converting other believes that other person's belief is not certain, so he would be able to convert. If the other person's belief is right, you cannot convert him to this belief. So it doesn't matter from what angle we look at it, it is not something that they all were talking about some permanent eternal entity. Okay? One who describes self as having material form and as infinite, if they describe such a self, just as before, this being so, it certainly it can aptly be said that the settled view of self as having material form and as finite underlies this. So Buddha goes into explaining all these situations where the form is self has form or self doesn't have form, or material or immaterial. Now, this is something which we never find in the dependent origination. It is just something added to it. That means the reality is things happening depending on these causes and conditions. But if somebody else talks about something else, it is completely out of this reality of dependent, sometimes people go co-arising. Non-describing of self. In what ways Ananda one does not describe self, not describe it, not describing self as having material form and as limited, one does not describe thus myself has material form and is limited, or not describing self as having material form and is infinite. One does not describe it thus myself has material form and is infinite. Or not describing self as immaterial and limited, one does not. So he denied the previous four positions in the second, in this paragraph. One who believes in it, try to confirm it, and one who does not believe it, does not try to confirm it. Therein another, one who does not describe self as having material form and as limited, does not describe such a self as existing only in the present. He does not try to convince others that it exists in the present, it will exist in the future, because he does not believe in the notion. That which is not thus, I will convert. So that person does not think of converting others, because he doesn't believe that there is something existing in the present or future. One who does not describe self as having material form as infinite does not describe self. Such self, just as before, all these 4 paragraphs. Now, these are the 2 sections that someone tries to describe self existing in one form or the other, or does not believe it existing in one form or the other. Now this is the very interesting passage or section that I think we were trying to find out in this morning. Panyaragan was trying to find out how people try to associate self with form, feeling, and so on. Now, when we see the entire thing is operating through causes and conditions, as I mentioned earlier, this additional appendix does not fit. That's what Buddha wanted to point out here. That is why Buddha introduced this notion of self, description or non-description. There is nothing to describe. But somebody might say, Buddha says, in what ways, Ananda, does one considering the idea of self consider it? One considering the idea of self either considers feeling as self, saying, feeling is myself. I think in Chaichakya Sutta, Buddha dealt with this. Or he considers feeling is not myself. Myself is without experience of feeling. It is just like inanimate, something without consciousness, because experiencing means there must be consciousness. So the self exists in itself by its own right, without anything to do with consciousness. As we know, any experience we get through our senses and combination of consciousness, the object, senses, consciousness and contact. And then we have other experiences, feeling and so on. Now, or he considers feeling is not myself. Myself is without experience of feelings. Why self does not have experience? Because it doesn't have consciousness. Or he considers feeling is not myself, but myself is not without experiencing experience of feeling. This contradicts the previous statement. This is just a belief. Myself feels, for myself is subject to feeling. These are people very nitty-gritty, hair-splitting argument they bring out to prove that there is self. There in Ananda, one who says feeling is myself should be asked, friends, there are these three kinds of feelings: pleasant feeling, painful feeling, and neither painful nor pleasant feeling. Of these three kinds of feeling, which do you consider as self? Do you consider pleasant feeling yourself, unpleasant feeling yourself, or neither pleasant nor unpleasant feeling yourself? So Buddha is bringing this argument to corner somebody and then disprove his belief. Therein Ananda, the one who says feeling is myself, should be, okay. Ananda, on the occasion when the experience of pleasant feeling, one does not on that occasion experience painful feeling, or neither painful nor pleasant feeling. On that occasion, one experiences only pleasant feeling. Out of these three feelings, when one experiences one feeling, other two feelings are not there. So if one would say, my pleasant feeling is self, then he experiences only 1/3 of the feelings. So he attributes self to 1/3 of feelings. Out of three feelings, he identifies self with pleasant feeling, then he precludes the other two feelings. So identify it with one feeling at a time. Okay. So, if this is a very beautiful argument. Okay. On the occasion when experiencing neither painful nor pleasant feeling, one does not on that occasion experience pleasant feeling or painful feeling. On that occasion one experiences neither pleasant nor unpleasant feeling. Ananda, pleasant feeling is impermanent, conditioned, dependently arisen, subject to destruction, falling away, fading out, and ceasing. This is very wonderful explanation. Yasmin ananda same sukham vedanam vedeti, neva tasmin same dukkham vedanam vedeti, na adukkam asukam vedanam vedeti, sukham yeva tasmin samaye vedanam vedeti. And so forth. So Buddha says, Sukhapiko ananda vedana anicca sankhata paticca samuppanna kaya dhamma, vaya dhamma, viraga dhamma, nirodha dhamma. So pleasant feeling goes through all these things. It is subject to destruction, falling away, fading out, and ceasing. And dependently paticca, dependently arisen. So, therefore, there is no room for self to exist. because it is the feeling, whatever feeling, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, arise depending on causes and conditions. Paticca Samuppanna. Sankhata. Sankhata means conditioned. Subject to destruction. Yeah. Impermanent, condition, dependent arising, and subject to destruction, falling away and fading out. If one were to identify self with this feeling, whatever it is, when the feeling changes, pleasant feeling goes through all these impermanence, conditioning, dependently arising, fading away, vanishing, disappearing, then self also must go along with that when one identifies with that feeling. That goes through through all these three kinds of feeling. So feeling, as we have discussed, three kinds of feeling Buddha used here, this applies to all the 808 kind of feelings. Pleasant, unpleasant, neither pleasant nor unpleasant, somanasa, domanasa, feeling arising through our 6 senses, 36 senses, kind of feeling, and feeling of the past, present, future, and feeling what you call samisa, niramisa, what you call carnal feeling and spiritual feeling, uncarnal feeling. Whatever feeling, if somebody identifies with self, so Buddha completely, flatly refuted, rejected using this argument. That means when whatever feeling it is subject to change, disappearing, fading away, dependently arising, and condition. So we know the condition for feelings to arise. What are the conditions? Senses, sensory objects, consciousness, contact. These four conditions must be there for the feeling to arise. These four conditions are not permanent. Eyes are not permanent. Visual objects are not permanent. Eye consciousness is not permanent. Eye contact is not permanent. And the feeling that arises depending on these four also not permanent. When all these are conditions, impermanent conditions, with impermanent depending on impermanent condition, if self arises, that also is impermanent. It's a beautiful argument Buddha used to prove that there is no permanent self. When he said no permanent self, can there be impermanent self? Yes. The conventional self. That conventional self, everything conventional is impermanent. Therefore, if somebody identifies something with anything impermanent, that also is impermanent. If one experiences a pleasant feeling, as Buddha went on for all these three kinds of feeling, Ananda, the one who says feeling is not myself, myself is without experience of feeling, he should be asked, friend, where there is nothing at all that is felt, could the idea I am occur there? You see? If there is nothing to feel, where there is nothing at all that is felt. Could the idea I am occur there? Certainly not, Venerable Sir. Venerable Ananda's reply is, no hetang bhante for everything. No hetang means no he etang. He uses here to emphasize. Definitely. No he etang bhante. The Pali words are very precise. Ananda said, certainly. He refers to certainly, not Venerable Sir. Therefore, Ananda, because of this, it is not acceptable to consider feeling is not myself. It is beautiful. In the first place, he proved that feeling is impermanent, therefore self is not permanent. In the next argument he says, if there is nothing to feel, can there be self in it? If there is nothing, that also doesn't. You try to identify with something that does not exist. So, no, Venerable Sir. I think we stop here for now and we continue after break.